this morning? I know y'all been here for a while, so I know you have more energy than that. How are you guys this morning? Good. All right, you guys ready for a special treat? So I want to introduce myself before I introduce our panelists. My name is Tyler Carter. I'm the multimedia journalist here for Columbus City Schools. I've seen some of you all around the district. I do a lot of the video work, some of the media work. I'm sure you've seen some of our media team as well out. But we have a new podcast, only a couple of months, started in November, hosted by myself and Dr. Dixon, your superintendent here, called Inside CCS. Some of you guys may have heard, got a chance to listen to it a little bit, but we get to talk to some of our CCS students and talk about their experience, and also bring some of your teachers and your principal and administrators on and talk about all the cool, fun things that goes on in Columbus City Schools. This month is Women's History Month. And to close out the month, let me back up a little bit. So every week we've talked to different girls across the district, young ladies like yourself, about different things they're doing. So we had wrestling, we had our wrestlers on from Briggs and also from Whetstone. They came on South, excuse me. Last week we had our youngest learners. We had a 10-year-old and 11-year-old from East Haven called Girls Rock. We had them on, and we had some other girls on as well, just sharing their experience and uplifting each other, because you all have stories too, right? Right? So today, this is the very first time we've ever done this, so you all are in for a very special treat. This is the first time that we've taken it semi-live on the road. Last week, Dr. Dixon and I tested it out ourselves live, but no video. We are videoing this time. It's not live, but we will post it on our social media site so you all get a chance to see it. And the first time we're doing this in front of an audience live. So how cool is that? That you guys get to be the first ones and the only ones also that get to have this experience with these great 5 powerful women in our community here. So let's give a hand for that. I want to make sure that we have enough time to kind of go through our questionings with my 2 co-moderators here. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, starting from the left of the stage, so you're all left. First person we have here is Miss Jennifer Adair. She is our board president for the Columbus Board of Education. She is also a Centennial graduate, so I know some of you all are going to Centennial. You let me know, so you can ask her questions about being a star. As well as we have Elizabeth Brown. She is a part of the Columbus City Council. Raise your hand a couple of years ago if you guys were here when we talked about introducing, or when we did introduce the hygiene dispensers in the bathroom. Were you guys here for that? Yes. Board Member Brown was the one who helped have that initiative start off the ground to make sure that we can get those hygiene products here for you all, and not just here, but also in other city buildings as well. We have a Dr. Talisa Dixon. I know you all know who Dr. Dixon is. Now, everybody should have their hand in the air if they know who Dr. Dixon is. Y'all know who Dr. Dixon is? Come on. This is your superintendent. Dr. Dixon is in her 3rd year here at Columbus City Schools. As well as Dr. Dixon is the former Brookhaven principal. I know some of y'all may be like, what are you talking about? But you may have some former teachers and former, some of your family members may have went to Brookhaven as well. Oh, Principal Tucker, Brookhaven. And then also you were the principal at Cause. So I know some of you girls have come up to me and said that you will be going to Cause next year too, as our 8th graders. Also, next to Dr. Dixon, want to introduce our first assistant police chief of the city of Columbus, LaShanna Potts. Ms. Potts made history along with Chief Bryant. She wasn't able to join us here today, but they both are strong women that joined us here from Detroit. 24 years on the Detroit Police Department. 24 and a half years. So we are very excited to have her here, as she is making a lot of history here along with Chief Bryant on the police department. And then our last special guest, last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Charleta Taveres, the Chief Executive Officer of Primary One Health. Ms. Taveres is a former elected official. You're also a Spelman grad and a grad of The Ohio State University. Let's give all of our panelists a hand. So it's not about me, it's about them and about you all here today. I want my two co-moderators to go ahead and introduce yourself, girls.
Hi, my name is Sheila Ochoa, and I'm an 8th grade ambassador.
Hi, my name is Rain Johnson, and I am Ambassador Vice President.
Awesome. So we have a couple of questions that we want to ask you all, and this is a safe space for everyone here. So just as soon as they ask questions, just jump on in, and we kind of just want to go ahead and have a real nice conversation. So go ahead.
Okay. How did you guys get your career started?
Do you want me to start? My career got started as a volunteer for a former state representative, and then later he became a senator. That's my elected career. And during my time as a volunteer for a year and a half, unpaid, I was his volunteer legislative assistant. So I served in the capacity as a volunteer. There were other legislative assistants who were paid, but I wanted to help this newly elected individual out. And it shared with me as a volunteer what that job entailed. It really helped me to understand that it was a lot like social work. Public service is a lot like social work. You help people with their problems, whether they're individual problems, family problems, neighborhood, or statewide issues that you're addressing.
So I'll go next. I started law enforcement at the age of 18 years old. I graduated from high school in Detroit and always knew that I wanted to go into law enforcement. So as soon as I graduated, I joined the Detroit Police Department and rose up through the ranks that way.
Wow. Awesome. 18.
18.
Wow. So I started my career, I was a high school teacher, and I had so much fun with that. It was a high school teacher in Akron, Ohio. And I also was a softball coach. Fast pitch softball. Have you ever seen fast pitch softball? Very different. And it was kind of funny because I was asking, I said, why are they throwing the ball so fast? But I started as a high school social studies teacher. I taught AP History, African American Studies, Economics, and World History. So I did that for 3 years before I went into administration.
So I started my career first by not knowing what my career was or what I wanted it to be. I want to stress that. When I was way older than all of you, into college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. There were a few things I felt certain about, which is that I wanted to love my work, and I knew I was willing to work hard. And so that means the first job I had in kind of this line of work, I wasn't doing anything glamorous. I was just really trying to be diligent. Similar to Senator Taveres, it was campaign work, right? So stuffing envelopes, getting water for my candidate when she did call time, which is dialing for dollars, all those little things. And I got to learn a lot about what was kind of happening above my pay grade, if you will. But I will tell you also that before I got into campaigns, I thought I wanted to be a writer. And I worked at a magazine. I spent about a year of my first year in my career, quote unquote, doing that, and realized that I didn't like it. I love writing, but I wasn't so good at being like the disinterested journalist. I had a lot of opinions. I had too many opinions to be a reporter. And I throw that out there because it took me some time to figure out that what I wanted was public service. And I want you all to remember that. Don't feel like you have to make the perfect choice all the time in your career. Think about what values you have and what you're willing to do to work for it, and listen to your gut.
Yeah, that is actually a really hard question for me. And it shouldn't be that hard, but I think because I kind of created my career. So I am a lawyer by training. I went to law school, and I knew when I was, your age even, I just knew I wanted to do something that made an impact, similar to what Councilmember Brown was saying. And for me, the law itself is foundational to our country and who we are and what governs us, and seeing people like Charleta Taveres, who is then a council member, knowing the impact that had. And so I chose the law, and I practiced for a while, but then I really wanted to do more, and I felt like I could do more. And so I made a transition into a new field. And so that's the thing. You guys might have careers that aren't even existing right now, right? And so I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, and I do a lot in that, from legal to helping our organizations, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And then I get to come and be your board president, which is the coolest part, but it is part of public service and giving back to the community that gave so much to me as a product of Columbus City Schools. My mom's a teacher here, and I have students like you here in the district. One thing that, what Councilmember Brown said I think is really important. I never ask students anymore, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because that's not the world you guys are going to go into. What I ask you is, what do you want to leave in this world? What is your mark? What is your passion? That's what's going to drive you. And when you can answer that, then the world is open. And you might have a variety of things that you do, but it's all about finding your passion.
Thank you.
All right, so when you began your career, did you ever imagine that you would have a leadership role?
I'll answer again. No, I didn't, because I was very shy up until high school. During the early years of my life, I was very shy and stayed to myself. I read a lot. In fact, when we moved from Franklinton, I went to a school that's shuttered now. It was Chicago Avenue Elementary School off of East Broad Street West Broad Street in Franklinton. And we moved to Berwick, so I was going to go to Johnson Park Middle School. Well, the summer that we moved into our house, my brothers went out into the neighborhood and met young people and got to know them before school started. Well, I was in my bedroom reading, and so I didn't get to know any of the children. And, I was just more so an introvert. But when I got to high school, something changed. I became more outgoing. And for me, it's not knowing what you want to do, as was shared early on. I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. And in fact, my counselor in my high school knew that I wanted to go into medicine. And her husband had found out about an opening the summer of my junior year. I was going into my junior year. And he shared it with her, and she shared it with me. It was at Sears Distribution Center, which is no longer in existence, on the west side of Columbus. They were looking for a young person who had an interest in medicine. And so that's what I did. I worked there for 7 years, off and on, through high school and college, because they provided a welcoming opportunity. I even went on Friday afternoons, I worked in the afternoon, and would go from work in my Warriorette uniform to go and be on the drill team. They were that accommodating because they wanted me to be exposed to the medical field. And so even though I went into politics, I always focused in on health and human services. And that's really important, as was shared earlier. you don't always have to know exactly what you want to do. Sometimes you're kind of guided, or your passion moves you in a direction. You're going to have many, many positions over the course of your life, because that's the way it is today. People don't stay in one career for 25 and 30 years as much as they did when my parents grew up, and even in my generation. Now people will have 13 to 16 jobs over the course of their lifetime, and that's okay. So I want you all to just know, follow your passion, do what you would do for free. And that's how I knew what I wanted to do. I would do it for free because it made me happy that I was helping someone else.
I guess I'll go. So at 18 years old, I had no idea. I didn't even know what to expect in law enforcement. I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to be impactful in the community in which I lived. And so when I got in there, I really just had fun. I had fun going out in the community, answering police runs, talking to citizens, and oftentimes I would get, "You're just a baby." And so sometimes you just had to let them know that you knew what you were doing. And as I began to lead my career, I had people pouring into me. And that's when I started realizing my leadership ability. It was others telling me, "You should probably take that sergeant's exam," or "You should probably go into this training academy." And so I will say to you, everybody has the potential to be a leader, and title does not make you a leader. It's what you do every day when no one's watching that makes you a leader. And so for me, I didn't understand until someone pointed it out to me that I had those potential to be great.
That's awesome. I didn't know that I was going to be a leader. I'm the second child of 4, and my older brother was so smart, so everyone always paid attention to Thomas. So I was kind of in his shadow, and my parents were teachers, so everyone expected Talisa to be as smart as Thomas. And so I was the child that was just always trying to figure out what I wanted to do, living in the shadows. I don't know if any of you guys have older siblings, and you're that number 2 child, and everyone's saying, "Oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Are you going to be as great as your older brother?" And so I kind of acted out a lot. In school, I was always striving to get a little attention, and I was trying to be the opposite of my older brother Thomas. And so when report cards came around, Thomas always had all A's, and Talisa had, a few C's, a few D's, and my parents was like, when are you going to wake up? They used to call me Lisa. Lisa, when are you going to wake up? When are you going to wake up? And it wasn't until I went to college, and it was my parents share with all 4 of us to say, they say, "Talisa, you can keep acting silly, but you're going to college. You're going to become something. So get ready." And when I was in college, I joined student council. I became a member of my sorority. And so it was those opportunities that I saw myself not, in the shadow of my older brother, but began to see me and what I could do. And so I would say to you all, just sometimes you don't believe in yourself because you're trying to emulate someone else, or someone else may be the person that teachers or counselors or everyone else is focused on. I would say just keep believing that is something in you that may not be tapped yet, but it's eventually going to surface, and it may be a different environment. So I think that really gave me the opportunity to say I can be a leader. I didn't know I was going to be sitting in this seat because my pathway was going in a different direction. I wanted to be a sociologist. But each step that I kept saying, there is something about me that is different. I'm not sure what it is, but I know it's not what Thomas, who is an engineer and really smart, but it's something about Talisa that I could be great if I just kept focusing and working hard. I think hard work pays off. I don't think that I'm as smart as my older brother, but I can outwork him. And I think it's something said about those people who are really smart and don't have to do as much work compared to those people that always work hard to make sure that I may not be the smartest, but I'm going to keep studying and keep trying. And then I think those plans will turn out well for you. So I think that's the part, I didn't believe it, I didn't know it until later. And then every step I started seeing like, oh my gosh, is that me? Oh my gosh, can I do this? Oh my gosh. And that validation and that support from others, mentors, et cetera, really helped propel me for where I am now.
That's awesome. I feel I have little to add to those three answers, other than that I don't know that I always thought I would be a leader in my career, whatever it may be, when I was younger envisioning it. But the one thing I want to stress is that leadership comes in all forms and looks all kinds of different ways. I happen to be a more classic extroverted type of leadership, right? And I knew that at a young age. I was always the one who wanted to get into debates in government class. And I went to a kind of conservative high school, so I had a lot to say in government class about a lot of things, and I liked the challenge. And so what was reflected back to me is that you are a leader because you talk a lot, you like to form opinions, you like to, change people's minds, and that's sort of how our culture tells us leadership looks. And I want to stress that it comes in all kinds of forms. And I think a lot about the leadership it takes to focus in on a problem and work steadily and diligently to fix it. It was leadership that brought us the COVID-19 vaccine, right? It was leadership that's brought us all kinds of incredible treatments, medicines, scientific advancements. And it's probably a more quiet type of leadership that has brought those things, along with really hard work. So I had people around me who believed in me and saw leadership in the way that I acted, and I think it's on all of us to see different types of leadership in the people around us and encourage what we see instead of trying to put, round pegs in square holes and have kind of one myopic definition of leadership. So I think what we're all saying is to go back to your gut, and I would bet $100 there is a leader in every single person in this room.
That's right. You are all leaders. And everything that they've said, I was also an introvert. I also have been told it's not your turn or you need to kind of wait. I was not a number two. I was a number one. So I did have my parents, I was Thomas. So, but there was a pressure. There's a pressure when you're a number one and you have that. And I am a slower, steady leader. And so there is so many different types of leadership styles. Actually, that's actually one of the things when we talk about, diversity and inclusion is around that idea of leadership. And there's so many different styles, and you need all those different styles. People, a lot of times, if they don't know me, like, today you put a mic in front of my mouth and you said, say stuff, so I will. But typically, if I'm in a room, I will stay pretty quiet, and I will take it all in. I will learn as much as I can about you, and I will actually say few words, but people say, gosh, what you said was really impactful. And that's my leadership style. When I was in high school, I was the captain of cheerleading. I was the volleyball captain. Yes, I did play volleyball. I was a setter, though. I was in these leadership kind of positions. But as what's been demonstrated, leadership is way more than title, right? Leadership is deciding, you know what? I see trash on my street, I'm just going to go pick that up because I don't want my community to look like this. Or, you know what? I'm going to help my sibling who's struggling with math because they need help. That's leadership, right? It's not about the titles. And that's the thing that people recognize, right? In all of the examples. And the truth is, we wouldn't be here without people that helped us along the way, especially as women leaders.
Describe your leadership style and how you lead others, leading as a woman in power.
I think we kind of were talking about some of that. I'll kind of pass it back this way, but my leadership style is one of collaboration and listening. I am a consensus builder. I try very hard to stay very strategic and focused on our outcome, like where do we want to go, and try to get people in the places that they can do their best work. Because everyone is a leader, but not everyone is the same leader, right? And so finding the places where people can lead best that helps us move forward is kind of the way I choose to lead, and really believing that everyone has value. So that's my leadership style.
I will be very brief in, you all can tell me what my leadership style is. I'll tell you what I aspire my leadership style to be, which is a mentor of mine once said that sometimes in a room you might be the smartest person in the room, right? Like everybody's there's one person who's the smartest person in a room. You might be the smartest person in the room, but you are never smarter than the room, right? So going in and having all the answers and forgetting to ask questions and understand everyone is a leadership failure. And so err the other direction. And that's what I aspire to.
Agreed. So I think leadership styles are situational. So it depends on a position, the type of leader that you need to be at that moment. But I think what I go most to is that of a servant leader. I believe that I'm in this position to serve others. And that sometimes you're in positions that you don't know the why, but when you look at your behaviors of how you lead, I think it gets you to that why. So are you this pushy person that has to push in all your ideas, or do you kind of sit back and you let other leaders emerge? So I go best to servant leaders. I believe it's situational, but at some point you have to lead and take reins. I know when I was a principal at both Cos and Brookhaven, sometimes I just led with, hey, listen, this is how we're going to do things, right? It's like your principal can attest to that. But it's always, for me, it's situational. But I think the last thing is I always lead from my heart. And then sometimes that's the toughest place to lead from. Because when you lead in from your heart, you have to make some really tough decisions and have some really tough conversations with people that you don't want to have. But your heart tells you when it's the right decision to make. Your heart tells you when to slow down and let others kind of get out front. But I think it's something about leading from the heart that goes back to, as we talked about, that passion. And that fire burns in you, and you know the decision that you need to make. So I think lead with your heart. It's always situational. And for me, I'm definitely a servant leader.
I'm going to echo what you said. I believe that I have the capability to be all of them. Some days, the opinions, I listen to them, but at the end of the day, it's going to be our decision. And there's days where I encourage people to speak up and give ideas. But I think mostly transformational. I believe that oftentimes people will see in me what they aspire. And so I'm always asking for ideas. I'm always mentoring and encouraging. And I think that's why I've been so successful in my career, is just always reaching out and finding someone, especially women in leadership. Growing up in the police department, we didn't have a lot of us to depend on. And so I make it a point that every step that I made, that I reach back and I grab 2 or 3 that are waiting in the wings, and I give them mentorship, encouragement. And I think that's more of what my leadership style is. But I think that any given day, depending on the person that's in the room, I can be all of them.
I would agree with what each and every one of my co-panelists have shared. I think leadership style for me is really consensus building with my senior leadership team at Primary One Health. Everyone has skills and talents that I don't have. And so when you understand that you're not always the best answer to whatever the issue is, whatever the problem is, that somebody else might have an answer or a solution to that challenge that is better than yours. But I prefer to have collaborative and consensus leadership. But I can make the tough decision when the tough decision needs to be made, can stand by it and defend it if that's what's necessary. But as Dr. Dixon said, I'm a servant of the people first. I never allowed people to call me a politician, because what comes up in your minds when somebody says politician? Greedy, self-serving, rather than a public servant, because that's why you're elected, to serve the people. And as the leader of Primary One Health, it's to serve the residents of Central Ohio who need health care. And you have to put that first and foremost. The customer, in this case, the patient experience, is first and foremost, and everything else comes after.
Why do you think it is important to have women in leadership roles?
Oh, if I can start. In law enforcement, it is extremely important that you have women in leadership for many reasons, but I'll just give a few. When you bring women into leadership roles in law enforcement, you find that your uses of forces go down. You find that your officer-involved shootings go down, but you also found out that your citizen connection goes up. And so women just generally have a nurturing nature. And as we've seen across this country with civil unrest, it is now that women sit in positions like the chief and I, where we lead organizations in tomorrow. So we know what the past is in law enforcement, and we can all agree that there needs to be some changes. And I think we've seen enough of that to know that women now must take the lead in a lot of these organizations to get the change that we want to see. And so I can only speak for law enforcement. I will tell you that compassion and empathy is a stone that needs to be had in law enforcement, and we've missed that mark quite a bit in the past. And now as we move to the future, you're going to see a lot more differences in community policing, which is the cornerstone of most agencies that it should be now, is that we're in the community. There is no us against them. It is us and we working together to create the world that we want to live in.
Yeah, wow. I think it's important for women to be in leadership, especially when little girls are looking. I never underestimate who's watching. Right? And when we see little girls and you think about what you aspire to be, you can't, as a quote, you hear people say you can't be what you don't see. And for me, like I said, my mom was a teacher, so I saw her in the classroom. I didn't see any female principals until I became a teacher. But I remember when I saw the first female superintendent when I was here in 2001. And I just saw that, and that picture of her and her cabinet said, oh my gosh, maybe one day that will be me. And that was in 2001 at a convocation here in Columbus, right? I saw that. And worked under that administration, and that at the time had an impact on me. And then to be able to come back into this district where I saw it and to be able to lead, it shows you the impression and impact that others can have on them when you just see it. So it's important for us that girls, little girls, see that they can be anything that they want to be, because it's in reach. You can touch it. It's not anything that's abstract. So all of you can come after and you can touch us and you can take pictures with us, and it's not foreign to you, and I don't underestimate that. And real quick, a quick story. I went and I read at a story at an elementary school and about Katherine Johnson. Katherine Johnson went into NASA. She was part of that mission. And I took I collect Barbie dolls. So I took my Katherine Johnson Barbie with me, with the book, just to show and tell. So they were passing the Barbie around. It was a third grade class, and the Barbie wasn't coming back. So I'm like, where's the Barbie? And so Scott Wortman was with me, and he said, it's still on the third row. I said, okay, watch the Barbie. So, we're waiting, and the Barbie still's not coming up. And so afterwards, I went to the little girl and I said, "Oh, do you like the Barbie?" And she was just staring at it. And she said to me, she said, "I've never seen a black," she said, "This is a Barbie, she's a black," I mean, it was so impactful. So guess what happened to the Barbie? She got the Barbie. But that was one of the things she wrote. The principal told me a few weeks ago that she told her she was still taking care of the Barbie. But you never know the impact, right? Here it is, a Barbie. I'm reading a book, and I have this Barbie about this lady who helped, get people into space. And that little girl was just so in awe. So never underestimate the impact that we have as leaders and knowing that others are watching. And it was just so heart-touching for me to be able to leave without the Barbie. So I don't know if I take another Barbie when I go read again, but she has that Barbie.
That is so beautiful. I love that. I think in politics and government, it's pretty simple. Why we need women in leadership? Because we need better outcomes. Like, just straight up, we need better outcomes, and without women in leadership, we will not get them. So much of what's wrong with our nation and probably our world today is a result of policy choices. Policy choices have been made throughout the history of this nation that have got us here to a country that is still unequal, where the zip code you're born into too often correlates to life expectancy, lifetime earnings, health, wealth, all those things, to a place where we know the statistics, the pay gap, the racial wealth gap, black women, what they earn on the white male dollar, Latino women, what they earn on the white male dollar, all of these inequities, childhood poverty, the fact that our wealthy nation still has one of the highest child poverty rates of any developed country, advanced country. This is because of policy choices. This isn't because we're bad people. It's because we've had largely the same type of people making policies for our history. White men have largely been in seats of governmental power, making choices, designing a nation, and designing laws that mostly serve their interests. That is what bias is. We know that, right? We're taught about bias, and I think that in government, it is one of the clearest examples of where bias gets us. So what's the answer? Get more women in leadership, get more black women in leadership, more black and brown women in leadership, and start to change the face of the policy makers, and we will start to change the outcomes of the policies they make. It is fundamental to the future of our nation. I have 3 children, and this is very personal to me because they will inherit this world, and we can do better.
I don't really have, that's absolutely right. So without representation in the room of any group, those ideas and decisions are not made as well as they could be, right? And that's the whole idea about inclusion. And it's not really, and everything that Councilwoman just said is 100% accurate. Our entire system is built on structural racism and sexism. And that is 100% accurate. So the only way to fix it is to get in the room, which is hard.
It is hard. It's hard to get in the room, but it's also hard to keep women in the room because they don't make it easy. And I can speak from an elected official's perspective as a state rep, as a city council member, and as a state senator. You get in the rooms, but they try and silence you or minimize what you are saying as a woman. We are 52% of the population. To say that we're only about 23% of the state legislators is sad because those perspectives are clearly going to be different coming from a woman's point of view. I can give you an example. I served on The most powerful committee in the Ohio General Assembly, that's the Finance Committee. That's where you dole out the dollars. You prioritize where dollars are going to be spent based on the policies that the General Assembly has adopted. There were 2 women on a 15-member committee, 1 Republican woman and 1 Democrat woman. 1 person of color, that would be me, the person of color, the person that was a woman, that was a Democrat. The woman on the other side of the aisle, as we say, Republican woman, Caucasian, we were the only 2 out of that 15-member body. We worked together on a number of issues. Infant mortality would be the first and foremost because we didn't want babies dying before their first birthday. Well, they didn't like it. The guys didn't like it. And so the next General Assembly, which is 2 years, I was the only woman. They had removed her because her Republican colleagues didn't like her outspokenness. So I used that to my advantage. They had started to live stream the Finance Committee meetings. So every time I had a question, I would say, I'm asking this question because I'm the only woman on this Finance Committee, and so I have to lift this issue up for the women of the state of Ohio. Or I have to lift this issue up because I'm the only African American bringing the perspective of people of color to the table. And so I embarrass them. Next General Assembly, there were 4 of us on the Finance Committee. So sometimes you can use a challenge to turn it around in your favor. We've got to have more voices because if we don't, we're going to get, as Councilwoman Brown said, the policies that are going to be detrimental to women and children and families.
If I can interject for a second, because what you're saying is exactly, I'm going to skip to some of our questions, so I want to make sure that we can hit on those real key points. Have any of you ever experienced resistance when you're leading men? And also, how do you navigate your power structure when you're in a field that's predominantly male-based?
I can share with you from my perspective, both in the elected positions, but also as a CEO of one of the larger nonprofits in Central Ohio. Sometimes you have to allow their underestimation of you to be your advantage, because they think that you don't have the skills that they do. They think you're not as smart because some people have this innate quality where they think just because I'm a Caucasian male, I'm smarter than an African American or a woman of color. And so use it to your advantage. Let them underestimate you and then blow them out of the water. That's what you have to do, because you do work harder and you do know how to work collaboratively with other women and men of goodwill to get things done. And that's the bottom line. It's about solutions. It's about fixing the problems within our community, not just talking about it.
I want to chime in here and say that in addition to being a council member, I work with an organization that works on women's public policy at the state level. And there is no more savvy lawmaker than Senator Charleta Taveres. And we would go to her on probably too many of our issues because we knew she could move the needle on them. So that is 100% true. And I actually think it's something I want to key in on a little more, because this is in politics, and I don't want to speak for fields I'm not as familiar with, but there is kind of an attitude in politics that, you know, maybe it's not really about having the best idea, but it's about like your relationships. You know, do you rub enough elbows? Are you in enough of the social rooms? And do you have those tight relationships? That's going to be way more important than actually if your idea is good. This is something I encounter a lot and largely from men. And I will say it's something I feel really self-conscious about, because I'm actually not in as many social rooms. I mentioned having 3 kids. My kids are 6 and 3 and 1. And I am very busy being their mom. And I love being their mom. And I love my job. And I think I should be able to do both, but I'm going to do each differently because I am both those people. I don't know how many of you tuned in to Ketanji Brown Jackson's hearings last week, but what hit me to my core was when she spoke to her daughters and said, I've tried to get this balance between working and motherhood right, and I know I didn't always get it right, but I hope I was still an example for you. She said it much better than I just did. And I think, that right there says my whole last answer about changing the face of policymakers, right? That's it. We saw that last week, the power of Ketanji Brown Jackson and what she's going to do for this nation, being on SCOTUS and understanding, bringing a new perspective to how we interpret our laws, all of that right there. But then the way she brought her motherhood to the table meant a lot to me. And so this is a roundabout way of saying that I do think it's not like a man comes up to me and says, I hate you because you're a woman. It's like usually not that easy to deal with. I could easily shut that down. It's this subliminal messages, I think, that are sent that if you're not, again, I'm speaking in politics here, but if you're not in enough rooms, being social enough, rubbing elbows the way that men do, then maybe your idea doesn't matter so much. It's more about your currency. And I struggle with that. I struggle with that a lot in my career. And I hope that good ideas do win the day. But it's an ongoing struggle.
So I want to touch on that struggle a little bit. I know this is not quite your question, but I think she lifts a really important point that we as women need to talk about. And it's this idea that we do get hit by microaggressions all the time that are basically sending you these signals. And the people that are doing it might not mean it consciously, right? It's just kind of part of social fabric, a lot of it. But telling you that you are not good enough, that you should not be in the room, that you need to do this or this or this in order to be at this level, right? And then that hits you and you start to feel like, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And that's called imposter syndrome. And that is real. And that happens. Let me tell you something. That happened to me the first time I sat at the board table after you all elected me to be on your school board. And I was a brand new member, and I sat there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I here? What am I going to do? And then I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is imposter syndrome. You do know what you're doing. You are strong enough. You have ideas. All you have to do is just be confident in yourself, right? Because each of you do, but we get those messages all the time. We get told, you shouldn't be here. And that's one of the things, and kind of going back to your question, I have been in those rooms as a young lawyer, and actually board member Beckerly here, if anybody wants to talk about lawyers, we are of different generations. She has different stories than I do. She was a corporate lawyer, and what that means being the only woman, a young woman in the room. When you choose to go into a field like policing, where you are few, it is hard. And then to have the power, like Senator Taveres did, to speak and to know that if I don't do this, we might lose our chance, right? And so that's what makes this space hard, because it's, you see us up here, and, we are all great and successful. I'm just saying that because I don't want us to have any more imposter syndrome. But every day, today, I woke up and I said, do I really know what I am doing? Do I know what I'm doing? Am I the leader I need to be in this situation? And I just have to look in the mirror and say, yes, I am what I am, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to try to let go of what other people say or feel about me and do the best I can. And that was today. And this is honest, right? Because we don't have it all figured out sitting up here, even though, we're in your brochure with our pictures and our bios. Every day is a new day of leadership for us. And these feelings, they hit you too, even though you are much younger leaders than we are. And you're going to have to work through that every day as you figure out who you're going to be and what you're going to do in this world. And we don't talk about that enough, I think.
Yeah.
Dr. Dixon?
Yeah, I was thinking when I first became a superintendent in another district, and we were embarking on a facilities master plan, and the community had approved $167 million for building a new high school and two middle schools. And I sat in a room, and I was the only female in the room with all of these construction people, all these executives. And so I started reading these books. One book, Lean In, right? So I started reading books like, how do you navigate in a room full of male executives who sometimes speak over you or don't look at you or don't feel like you have power in that space? And I think what I had to do in that situation is just remind people who had to sign the checks, right? Every check had to be signed by me. And so I started reading books and wanted to make sure I worked collaboratively, but made sure I leaned in so the people understood the power that you have in that space. And it's not being arrogant, right? But it's showing people that I have a right to be here. I'm here. My voice matters. And I write and I sign all the checks. So I think it's important when we're thinking about how we navigate. I think we navigate with grace, but with knowledge, with courage. And when we have to be forceful, we come with a lot of force. And it makes sure that everyone understands that we have a place, we are proficient in these jobs, we know what we're doing, and we can do these jobs even better than some others. But I think that's important that we make sure that, for me, it was just kind of reading about how to navigate, because we think differently from men. You know, it's not that one is better than the others. We make decisions very differently than men. But from the school district perspective, when we think about Columbus as the largest school district in the state, we have a $1 billion budget. Not millions, billion.
Almost 2.
Right? So when you think about, I never forget when I was announced as superintendent, they did an article in the newspaper about my salary. You know, and I said, wow, would they have done that if there had been a male? Right? It was important to say that here's this woman coming to the district, but look how much she's making. And they even stated she's making more money than the governor. Right? So to what end, right? It's like, are you kidding me? So those things that, you know, they're going to say those things, I think, because we are women, right? To your point about the hearings, when you see that here's a person who was very established, and we are enough, but to be made feel that you're not enough, and that you don't deserve to be at that table, and that you're always questioned. Right? And I'm always mindful of the questions and the emails and stuff that I received. And I would say, would my predecessor have received those questions? You know, am I being questioned all the time because I'm a female, because I'm Black? You know, but people don't think that you know enough. You know, why am I always getting all these questions? Or why am I always feeling like I have to defend myself in this space or defend a decision in this space? So I think it goes back to, you know, the whole, you know, just ensuring people that you didn't get to these positions by accident. You know, we didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, I want to be a superintendent. I want to be, and bam, the fairy godmother made it happen. You know, we all have our different stories of how we got here, but we deserve to be here. We worked hard to get in these positions, and we have to demonstrate, though. You always have to demonstrate excellence in everything that you do. You just don't get the position and rest on your laurels and think that the work is going to magically happen, right? So you have to work hard once you get in those positions, in these positions, but then also know that you cannot do the work alone. you always have to build a coalition of people to work with you, because if you're on that island by yourself, you're going to be there by yourself, and everybody else is going to leave the island. So you have to make sure that you're doing this work with others. And then the last thing, have some vision. I think vision matters. People need to know that you're leading them somewhere. And when they don't know where you're leading them, then you can have some discord.
So I'll be very brief. Right now, women in leadership role in law enforcement is roughly about 3%. And so when you talk about chiefs, and then you talk about black women who are chiefs, that number is even smaller. And so every time I'm in a room with men, I make it a point to always remember it's not about me. I am setting the tone for women that are going to come after me. And so I'm very mindful of how I behave. Unfortunately, we have to always be mindful about how people view us, because perception for some is reality. And even when I have to go, as you said, get real with someone, I'm always mindful about what that looks like, because I never want to be labeled as the angry black woman. And so a lot of times women of color will get that for saying the same thing that our male counterparts have said in the exact same way that they said it. But when people look at us, they'll see anger. And it's not anger, it's frustration. It's always having to prove that we belong at this table. And I'll give you a story. Coming from Detroit, we did something right. We had a lot of women in leadership roles in Detroit. And when the chief and I stepped into Columbus, it was like going back in time. When we looked around the city, we saw women in leadership roles, but when we got into the division, we only had one female lieutenant, we had a female commander, and we had a female deputy chief. But everyone else surrounding them were male. And then when we looked at color, it was 74% white men running this organization. And so the chief and I thought that we would have an uphill battle. I will say we haven't been well received by everyone, but I will tell you the men and women of this division just wanted leadership. They wanted strong leadership, and they wanted people who knew what their roles were going to be, and they wanted a clear message, and we've been able to deliver that. And so any room that I'm in, if a man doubts me, by the end of that conversation, he is no longer an enemy but an ally. And so it's important that we bring them into us and show them what we're made of, because they're going to come in with perceptions. Oftentimes, we're black women, we walk into law enforcement, and we may be the only black women in the room. We may be the only women in the room, and we'll sit around the table, and we'll let everyone go ask everyone else, and then we'll remind them of who's the chief. And so they have to eventually come back to us. And so you always remember, hold your head high. You're going to be in spaces where you will be the only voice, but do not be silenced.
We have a lot more questions, but I want to make sure that you all have the opportunities to ask the questions that you want to ask. So Fatima is going to call on whoever has a question, and you can come up to the microphone here and ask your question to our panelists.
My name is Cadence, and I am in the 6th grade. My question is, what tips can you give us to become great leaders like yourselves?
Believe in yourselves, right? So we have you'll have mentors. You're going to have people that care about you, but the truth is, it's you. You kind of have to do it and make those decisions and feel confident in you, right? And so you have to believe in yourself, even if no one else does. If you have a vision and a passion and a drive, that will help you. And just really believing and knowing that you can do it. And I know that all the ladies are going to give you a lot of different advice, but that's mine. It's just really believing in yourself.
I'll say surround yourself with people that you are confident that you want to emulate. So if you know that there are girls in your school that have what you aspire to be, surround yourself with them. I always tell, especially young girls, reach out. We don't do enough talking to each other as girls. It's We're rooted sometimes in competition, and instead of us getting to know each other, we're often competing for whatever this invisible space is that we believe all of us can't fit into. So I would say wrap your arms around the women that are in your group and continue to nurture and mentor each other as you get older.
I would say start to identify where your passion is. Start volunteering as a young person. When I was in high school, I started teaching young people who had Down syndrome how to swim because I wanted to help people, and I wanted to advance the camaraderie between young people who were differently abled and those of us who had no physical challenges or developmental disabilities. So find something that you enjoy doing and volunteer. It may expose you to a career.
Mm-hmm. I would say, any of you members of Girl Scouts or was a Brownie? There you go. See, you're already in a leadership. Like, I was a Brownie, I was a Girl Scout until a ninth grade, but I think those experiences really showed you about working well with others, becoming a leader. So stick with those organizations. They really, because you can do fun stuff by being a leader, right? And so I think for me, that helped me a lot. So join, was a principal, hey, let's get some Girl Scout troops here. And so all of you, if you can, join a Girl Scout troop. You will absolutely love it, and your principal will help you navigate through that process.
My tip is to follow their advice. And I would add to Assistant Chief Potts, she said surround yourself. Also, if you can't surround yourself with them, read about them. There's so many amazing women to read about.
Can I actually chime in? So Ms. Potts brought up imposter syndrome. So have you ever experienced that? And if so, how did you guys navigate yourself through it?
Yeah, no, I think I gave my example. That is real. It happens to all of us. And first of all, it's identifying that you're in it and saying to yourself, wait, this isn't true. I know the truth about me, and being able to pull yourself out. But that's hard because you have to be able to identify that and understand it's happening. So that doesn't happen just to me at a board table. It happens to you guys too, by the way. It happens when you're about to sit and take a test. It happens when you're about to try out for a team. It happens when you're about to fill out the Girl Scout application and then doubt yourself. Like, this happens all the time, and it's about saying to yourself, wait a minute, I am good enough, and this isn't real. I'm just doing this in my mind. I'm doubting myself. I have belief in myself.
Yeah, I think finding a script that empowers you is a really good way. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, like out of a self-help book, but I do believe if you have a script in your head that you can go back to, that just kind of repeats the wonderful things about who you are and what your heart is and what you're worth, it's really helpful. And I will tell you, I have imposter syndrome like on a very regular basis scrolling through social media. So sometimes what I do instead of the script is put my phone down, reorient back to whether it's my kid or my coworker or whatever, like a real in-person meaningful relationship that grounds me and like, this is why I exist, not for the endless scroll. I don't know if that's relatable, but even us old adults really go through that.
It's a really great example. Someone who has an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
It's a great example.
I would say for me, positive affirmations are always good, but I believe that I serve a higher power, and so I always start the morning with, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so when I'm feeling less than, or I feel like I didn't get it right, and as women, we often want to be perfectionists because we don't want that failure to be on the shoulders of that one mistake that we made that will help deter women that are coming behind us. So I use positive affirmations a lot to encourage myself daily.
I think the positive affirmations are important to all of us, but I also think surrounding yourself with those individuals who support you, but not just tell you that everything that you're doing is perfect, but share with you even when you have a challenge. that they believe in you and they're going to help you get through whatever it is. Surrounding yourself with supportive friends is really important, but also those family members that ground you and keep you lifted up.
Mm-hmm. And I would say last as it's two things. One, as young women, speak life into each other, right? So when I think about when I was a high school student, I was always the tallest, lanky, and didn't feel like I was pretty in high school, and I was always kind of finding something, trying to figure out what was positive within me. What could I do? And so being a high school principal, I know what it's like to talk to girls and girls not feeling good about who they are and always wanting affirmation from others. So please lift each other up. I think it's so important that we tell one another how fabulous you are, how beautiful you are. That is so important because, you take that with you as adults and you still kind of feel like you're not enough, right? And so please do that. And then when you become an adult too, I think in these jobs, it's exactly what we've all shared. I had to learn not to look at social media because every decision, for my first 2 years as superintendent, I did not watch TV. I didn't even have a TV for my first year because I knew I would always, with something on the news, something that's making you second guess a decision that you make. And so you don't want that to get in your psyche, right? Because it does. It hangs on with you, just like with the phone and social media. So as young people, speak life in one another. Say something positive to a friend or a stranger every single day. You just don't know how much just saying hello or good morning, you look nice, or right, that just really carries something that person needs to hear that, right? They may not hear it at home, but if they hear it from a stranger or from a friend, that's someone that cares and see them every day, believe me, that is going to have a lasting impact.
Any other questions out there?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Abrielle. I'm in 8th grade, and I was wondering, how do you work yourself through a situation where somebody is doubting you because you are a woman?
Someone's doubting you because you are a woman. I think affirmations, what you were saying, Chief Potts, I think that plays a really big role. And, affirmations start with, it's not just a mantra about how to see the world, but it's a mantra of belief in yourself. So some of the best affirmations that I use with myself, or I was talking about kind of that script I tell myself, is they're really personal, right? They're not something I can tell myself every day, but they're really personal. And when I'm feeling particularly like there's a particular challenge or someone's doubting me, especially because I'm a woman, although I can never see in their heads exactly why they're doubting me, they could be doubting me because they're jealous, right? I'm being a little facetious here, but you can feel like maybe they're doubting me because I'm a woman, or you could feel like maybe they're doubting me because they know that I'm powerful, they know that I'm smart, they know that, right? And that's a kind of script, that's a kind of affirmation where it's about reorienting the problem to recognize your power in surmounting it. It's a bit of a nebulous answer, but I do think so much can come back to how we think about our approach to a problem.
I think the affirmations are critically important. I had to do a kind of a self-painting with an organization that I'm on the board of. We had like a fun time of painting ourselves, and we were supposed to write affirmations, and the ones that came to me is I am strong, I am blessed, and I am empowered. And so, just say something simple like that every day to yourself, or when you're in a challenging situation or doubting yourself.
And I will give you this advice, especially if it's in your face that it's because you're a woman. You confront that man, and you tell him what your accolades are. You tell him where you've been and what you bring to the table, and then he can either take it or leave it, but it's not going to stop you from doing the work that you're sent here to do. And so eventually, even those who doubt you will see your greatness. And so sometimes you have to confront it, and other times you just let your work speak for itself. And eventually they'll come around.
Sorry, just to add, I know I already spoke, but to add on to that, it's kind of like you will prove them wrong. And I want to cite again the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings last week, because that's what was happening. She was being doubted because of who she is, right? Because she is a woman, because she is a Black woman. She was being doubted for those specific reasons. And a couple different things happened. First of all, she showed them her power. She spoke powerfully. She proved how unquestionably qualified she is for the role of Supreme Court Justice. And what also happened is people surrounded her with their belief in her, right? So she found folks in the room that did believe in her, that were willing to come. Not that she needed rescued, but everyone needs an aid, right? Everyone needs help. Everyone needs fortified. And obviously Senator Cory Booker's speech will go down in history, I think, as one of really meeting someone where she needs you at that moment, where she needs fortified. So again, her hearings are on my mind and hold so many lessons, I think, for each of us in our own little daily lives.
I think that everything that they've said, maybe a little twist, and it kind of, Dr. Dixon's earlier comments made me think of this. I think we've kind of painted this as a male-female thing, but I'll tell you, sometimes the biggest challenges I've had in my career have been other women. And in particular, women who may be of a different generation than I am. And maybe, had to come through things in a little bit of a different way than I did. And it goes back to Dr. Dixon's point, and we're not lost here, we're at an all-girls school, right? It is tough out there for girls. And the last thing we need is for another girl to not have our backs, right? And so, in those situations, I almost find that a little bit harder to deal with, because I'm like, wait a minute, shouldn't we be helping each other out? But, then, trying to just come back, and for me, it's about trying to understand them, understand their story, understand why they have this perspective, and then try to approach it differently. And then, in the end, just prove them wrong. But, it isn't always a male-female thing. Sometimes it can be a girl-on-girl issue.
We got time for 2 more questions.
Hi, my name's Asma Idris. I'm from the 7th grade. My question is, have people shut you down or your ideas down because you are a woman? This is for all panelists.
Well, the question was, have people
shut you down or your ideas down because you're a woman?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately for law enforcement, we're a little archaic, that we do have, it's a male-dominated field, and so oftentimes women are the minority in the room. And sometimes I've learned to sometimes use men to get my point across. I'll feed them the message that I want to get out so that they can deliver it. And so at the end of the day, my agenda is still pushed. They may have been the person that spoke it, but it's what I wanted to see happen. And so you'll learn as you get older, you'll learn how to use your strengths. You'll learn whether it's for you to speak up in a room or was it for you to use allies that are on your behalf to speak up on your behalf. But always remember to get your point across. And don't do it in anger. Do it in a way that makes them respect you, but also know that the next time that they address you, it'll be in a respectful manner.
Mm-hmm. And that's hard, right? So that's not doing it in anger. That's the piece that's hard. Just, yeah, that's good advice, but that's hard. I think for me, I am the 3rd African-American female in this position. So there were 2 others that paved the way for me, right? And so I think it's because of that, it may be some difference. But, always try to be graceful, in everything you do, as you stated, but be firm, but graceful. And then know that everyone's ideas matter, right? Even though they may sound like totally off the, didn't make any sense to us. But as she stated, being respectful and just giving everybody opportunity says, yes, that's an idea, it matters, but that may not be the best idea. And then when people try to shut you down, just always, you listen, but you be firm and forceful and letting people know that your idea and your thoughts really matter. And so I always try to be in my team meetings the last one to speak. Because sometimes being a leader, if you speak first, everyone take your idea and run with it. They may not agree with it, but they're just doing it because you're the leader. So I just try to be last to speak and give everyone an opportunity to be heard, and then try to make a decision. But when people shut you down, just always say, I'm going to be bigger than that person. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to leave respectfully, even though I may be upset about what happened. Don't internalize that and make it be about you personally, right? Sometimes it's about our position and about our gender, but not about you personally.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes it is just about them. So like another way to think about that is if it's a male-female situation, like they didn't shut me down because I'm a woman, they shut me down because they're a man. A couple examples. One was I had tried for a position on Columbus City Council and didn't get it, and a man in a position of power saw me a couple months later and said, like, well, it's really great you didn't get that position because you're pregnant now. Just volunteered his opinion about my pregnancy, which I thought had very little to do with my career, but he's a man and he didn't get that. So it was about him not understanding reality. It wasn't about me as a woman happening to be pregnant. And ultimately, I actually ran for office while 7 months pregnant. So, and I had to stand up in front of a room of a meeting he was chairing and get support from that group. And it was a really good redemptive feeling. But another situation, when someone shut me down because they're a man, not because I'm a woman, is actually when I first tried to interest the folks at Columbus City Schools to put menstrual products in their restrooms. And the person at that time who was sort of fielding that request told me that he didn't think it was important because it wasn't a classroom issue. It wasn't an instructional issue. Now that right there is someone shutting me down because he's never had a period. If you've had a period, you know that it turns into a classroom issue, that it turns into an instructional issue, that you think about it, that you have to miss class for it, et cetera, et cetera. And when there was a woman in charge, eventually, and I broached this subject with, I actually didn't even go into any detail. I just sort of mentioned it, and immediately, again, it was not about him. It's not about me, it was about him not having the experience that I was trying to bring to the table, and that did not occur when I had that very same conversation with Dr. Dixon. So I throw that out there as just an offer of reframing.
And, if you are met with where you are being dismissed, and I can think of when I was, first starting my career and starting kind of, what is this kind of space that I was creating? People told me no all the time, whether or not that be because I'm a woman, because I'm a minority, whatever it is. And I just went around them. If you believe in it and you find your allies, you find your support, you find a different way to talk about it, you find a different way to connect with them, it is about them. It's not about you. That's kind of a way to keep moving. Don't let anybody, even though they shut you down in the moment, don't let them shut you down permanently, right? And that's part of that, having that confidence in yourself, having the vision, having the knowing where you're going, and just finding another way. It doesn't matter if you're young. It doesn't matter if you're a woman. If you feel like you have something to offer, do it.
And don't let it be just about you. Don't take it as if it's about you. It may be because of your gender, it could be because of your race or ethnicity. However, you can flip that script and still get your point across. Being the first, as many of us were, the first to be in a position, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders to make sure that you do it right, but we all make mistakes. Just pick yourself up and continue on whatever journey you're on. And then if you're a first in whatever career, whatever challenge, whatever position that you're going after, make sure you're not the last. Make sure the door isn't closed, that you're bringing other young women through the door so that they can not only succeed where you succeeded, but even surpass where you've been.
One last question.
Hi, I'm Joelle and I'm in 8th grade. Does a man ever try and take control when you're leading? If so, what do you do to get back to the subject you were talking about?
To take control of your meeting or leading?
Leading.
Leading. Daily, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm a little bit kidding, a little bit not. I don't know. Depends on how many men I see that day. No, I think that is a common experience, and I wouldn't even say it has much to do with leadership. Dr. Dixon, it has to do with leadership and then all other roles too, whether you're playing a supporting or leading role in a room. Dr. Dixon talked about being the last one to speak, and that it helps to kind of demonstrate her power, which is really good. And I read, I'm gonna get this maybe a little bit wrong. I'm pretty sure I read there was a group in the Obama White House, a group of women staff people that recognized they were having meetings, and they were all, you have to be really smart and really accomplished to work in the White House, right? So all these folks were exceedingly smart, exceedingly accomplished. They'd be in meetings, mixed gender meetings, and the women started to notice men were repeating their ideas kind of and taking credit for them. So they made a pact amongst each other that every time they saw that happen, another person would jump in and say yes, as Dorothy said, and bring it back to the originator of the idea, who was a woman. And I just thought that was a really cool example of a pretty common phenomenon in the workplace, but B, a way that women have each other's backs and that they help to take back control of that leadership.
That happens a lot, what you just said. And again, it's one of those things that I think is an unconscious thing between men and women and communication style, because there is studied differences between how women and men communicate. The same thing, probably inspired by the same story, but our former chief CIO, who's the chief of all information technology for the state of Ohio, was a black man. And he did the same thing, because he noticed that among his team that other men were taking or usurping females' ideas, and he would always bring it back. I can't think of a personal situation where, it's so hard because it is almost an oddly daily challenge, but it's not always up front, in your face challenge, right? Sometimes it is just questions or mansplaining or, just something that kind of digs at your leadership. I don't think I've ever, at least in this current leadership role, had anyone try to just take the leadership away. But there's certain things that happen, but sometimes it's just kind of common. It's unfortunately very common in kind of workspaces between men and women too.
And I think it's the communication style of men and women. Generally, one is more aggressive, and it's generally men because they want to hurry up and get their ideas out there. And then if a good idea comes from a woman, they'll try and take credit for it. But I've never had a problem with a male trying to take over my leadership. I'm proud that my leadership team at Primary One Health, there are 3 African Americans and 3 women. We are pretty inclusive and balanced. And then as an organization, we take pride in including the racial, ethnic, and cultural communities of the patients that we serve. And one of the things that I wish more organizations would do is to make their boards, which is the governing body, reflective of the customers, patients, clients that they serve. Our board is required that 51% of our board members must be the patients that we serve. And right now, 9 out of the 15 are patients of Primary One Health. Just think about it. If every for-profit and nonprofit and governmental entity did that, we would have a more inclusive and diverse board of directors, commission, school board, et cetera, because we'd make sure that all voices were heard.
I don't find that within the organization, but it's really clear when I am partnering with other organizations. And so you could be sitting at the table with other executives or other people who want you to really share in their ideas, or you bring up something that you want to partner with, and you go to another meeting and, hey, it's their idea. We just had this discussion in DC, me and some board members, and we were talking about an idea that I shared with someone. And someone was saying, well, they're going to take that idea and make it their own. And one of the other board members said, you know what, that's okay, as long as we get what we want out of it. And I'm saying to myself, well, why can't it be just our idea? Why can't our ideas? But so you navigate that, right? Is it in order to get things done, do you have to let someone else feel is their idea? As women, right? Why can't it be our brilliant idea and we need you to join with us, even if we get the credit, or does it matter who gets the credit, right? Do we do that because we're women? Great.
Credit is very male.
Yeah,
credit taking.
Yeah. So that is like, we're like, what? Why can't we just, it's just a brainstorm. Here's an idea. But I find that in my position, it's giving the other person credit if you want to partner with someone, but not necessarily within our organization. But that is a heavy lift too, because you're doing things, at least our decisions are based on, what we can do best for our students, because you're our customers. Every decision that I'm making is because of all of you, and want to make sure that you have the best experience in this organization. But it is tough when you're trying to partner, when someone else says, yeah, we can do that, Superintendent Dixon. And the next thing you know, there's a big rollout, and you're thinking, did they have that idea? We just talked about that.
We did just talk about that.
Yeah. But now I'm glad you said that. That is a male thing, that they want to take the credit, as if our ideas don't matter and they're not a powerful idea that can really get some big stuff done.
Leadership should really be outcome-based, not credit-based, And I do think that, I hate to speak in gender generalities, but I do find with women leaders, we're oriented towards outcomes. That's not the case for every single woman. It's not the case for every single man that they're the opposite. But instead of even assigning that gender label to it, let's just all say we need outcome-based leadership, and credit, whatever, it has its place, but that's less important.
I would say for me, I don't need the credit. I don't. There are many ideas throughout my career that I brought to the table that someone else took it and ran with it. And I always think about what was the outcome. What did I want to achieve? And if the achievement was met, it doesn't matter that I got the credit or not. Even sitting in this seat now, as we go around the table, and like she said, we partner with people, and we give an idea, and then the next thing we know, we see it roll out, and we're like, okay, well, as long as it was what we wanted to accomplish was accomplished, that was the goal. So I'm not ego-driven. My name doesn't have to be on it for it to work. So
let's give our guests a round of applause. Thank you all so much. for joining us and sharing your career with us and your great thoughts and what it is that you all are doing to continue to do to be strong leaders, strong women leaders.